Hi, my name's Dee Harding. I'm currently based in Brisbane on Yagara and Turrbal country, and I'm connecting from a studio at Yeronga on the south side of Brisbane. I was born and raised in central Queensland, not on ancestral territories in a town called Moranbah, but my grandmother is a Gungulu woman, and she has maternal connections through Gurringbal family lineages over towards the Carnarvon Gorge region. And my mother's father is a Bidjara man. So I have Bidjara and Gungulu and Gurringbal family connections in central Queensland, as well as Gungari. And my father is a non-Aboriginal man who has lineages back through agriculture and back through land-based life into Europe. The story from my childhood that I find actually very moving when I remember it at this moment is now as an adult, being taught how to care for the timber that I might use for carving. One of my mother's great-grandfathers, a man who's finished up now, Grandad Tim Kemp. I learned a lot from him and Grandad Tim and my father in conversation around working timber and how to carve timber. But the thing that is really formative for me and that I find important right now is that Grandad Tim impressed upon us how to care for that timber. So we can just cut a tree and start carving that timber, and we can approach it in a number of different ways, but he taught us how to care for the tree, know its story and know its place and location within a bigger story. How mapping presents in my world, or what mapping might mean to me, is often around relationality. But if I'm thinking about a location, say where a timber or an ochre has come from, or if I'm talking about, say, Woorabinda, a community that I often refer back to in my practice, that's always in relation to the others that are around, where the other ochre is in relation to that one that I'm talking about now, or where the other stand of rosewood is in relation to the one that we are referring to the tree that was cut now, or Woorabinda in relation, say, perhaps to Cherbourg, which is often how the community relate. So in terms of mapping, we might be here in this specific location, but often if we're referring about something other than here, it's then in relation to something else, and then in relation to something else again. One of the practices that I've been witness to is particularly the Bidjara man in my family, speaking rote almost, but with pride and with great care, and even sometimes some joy around knowing all of the watersheds and all of the runs of all the creeks which run into the bigger river systems, which run then outward, and all the different territories and communities and language groups that those waters go from. But they can often say the Murray-Darling system that we're all quite aware of. I've witnessed the Bidjara men in particular in my mum's family speaking about this particular little tiny watershed here feeds into this one, which feeds into this one, which goes down here. And then my mate who's down in Wiradjuri actually sees some of that water as well. So that's been normal. That's what they were taught and conditioned to know in that relationality in maps as well around ecosystems, particularly with the way water and water responsibility flows from one person and one community to another. Hopefully, my intention is that the work that we're presenting for the 23rd Biennale of Sydney with rivers is hopefully that will bring forward mapping, and hopefully that will build upon what we've been doing in the practice by drawing attention back to a specific location. In the past, in other major wall paintings, I'd illustrated the river systems and how they were connected, and we could locate them in the gallery and talk about those from afar. And this time I'm working with my mother's brother, Uncle Milton Lawton, and his uncle, Uncle Stephen Kemp, as Gungulu men in central Queensland at Woorabinda. Uncle Steve, or Grandfather Steve to me, is a senior Gungulu man there on his father's territory. And what we hope to do is to draw attention back to Woorabinda and the Mimosa Creek via the work in the Sydney Biennale. And hopefully that also stirs conversations within the work of the Biennale as well, ideas around local responsibility and local familiarity around rivers and waterways and ecosystems. Hopefully that stirs in the community as well in Woorabinda and surrounding with agricultural leases, greater familiarity or renewed familiarity in their own waterway at the Mimosa Creek. And so hopefully by making a wall painting in situ in Sydney on Gadigal territory that begins its life in a series of events in Woorabinda, hopefully that draws attention across the different spaces and within contemporary art back to Woorabinda, there within the Sydney Biennale and internationally. There was a few years ago I was travelling across central Queensland, actually from Woorabinda to my parents' place on the coast, Mackay region. And I took a road which I'd never been down before, which really, from what I can see, people only go down there if they're in that agricultural community across 100 kilometres or so. And there I interacted with a river which I grew up nearby, the Isaac River at Moranbah. And this was down on the May Downs Road, somewhere east of Middlemount. But I had this idea that how many people get to see this stretch of the river? It's in really great condition there, with these huge melaleucas and with actual water plants still growing in the water. So they're planning a series of walks. We're calling it a walk in total, but it's likely to be a series of events where the senior ones in the community will facilitate anyone who's interested, and particularly young people, to come and spend some extended time in contact with the Mimosa Creek and to be getting back out there across those agricultural fence lines. The Woorabinda block might only have conventional access to certain parts of the Mimosa Creek, and then a pastoral lease begins, and then a next pastoral lease begins, and the next pastoral lease. Well, how many Gungaloo people actually who inherit genetic and social and spiritual relation to that creek, how many people get access across those fence lines? The work is to see how can we get that occurring again. What does it need to take for the relations across those fence lines to be developed or rekindled or established for the first time, so that as many people as possible can be familiar and aware with what's happening on their waterway.